There's a couple things still remaining before we can complete this project. We're going to be hatching the walls. We're going to be identifying the floor finishes and the patterns. We're going to be applying a title block, plotting the final project. One of the things I left out in here is this exterior door in my project, which is in this location. But I wanted to show you how we can modify hatching. So this next step sequence is to hatch or fill in some of the information so that it looks more like a presentation drawing. So this is our hatch symbol. Now, you'll notice I'm in layer 0. And hatching is kind of unique. You'll see as we go through this. I can actually create my own hatch layer and make sure everything's on there. Or it will place the hatch within layers that are currently present. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to click on the layers property here, and I'm going to make a new layer and then call it hatch. And I'm going to give a color, and the color I want to pick is this very light gray, color index number 9. And the reason being is it doesn't overpower the drawing. So I'm going to click on hatch. And when I click on hatch, there's several different options. These walls, for instance, I may want to make solid. So I'll click on solid. And there's two different ways of hatching. You can either pick a location or you can select an object. So for instance, if I have a rectangular object, I can pick the object itself and it'll hatch it. Now I'm just moving my mouse over these different areas and it's doing all the calculations for me. So with this being where it is, you can see what's happening right now. If I move my mouse over a location and I click, and I go another location and I click, okay, and then I press enter, I've now hatched these items solid. Now it's because the current layer was 0, it went into that layer. I'm going to make the current layer hatch, and I'm going to change this property. I'm just going to click on the hatch, and now it says by layer. But where do I actually want to place this? I want to place this into the hatch layer. Now this menu pops up, which doesn't allow us to access the layers menu or the properties menu to be able to change that. I can go into the secondary menu here. Let's go into home. And in this menu, I can then select the hatch layer. And now it's hatched within that layer itself, which is a lighter layer. And press escape. And you can see the walls are very light. I can also change the hatch at any time by selecting the hatch and then changing the components to it. Now you may look at this and go, nothing is really changing. Why? Well, when you click on this, you must make sure that when you select the hatch, you can also adjust the properties of the hatch or the density of the hatch. And that is critical to what we actually can see. And you can see right now the density is set to 1. So the hatch is there, the pattern's there. It's just really, really small. So let's say if I change that to 100, what do I see now? Well, the patch itself, I'm going to zoom in. I can start seeing the definition of the hatch. So I'm going to go back into this. I'm just clicking on this, and I'm going to change that to 1,000. And you can see I'm matching a patterned scale. And I can go in here and I can adjust this at any time. And usually, if I want to make it twice as thick, I'd go half the size here. So I'm going to change that from 1,000 to 500. And I may want to accept that value. Okay, so let's say, for instance, I've hatched this. And I want to hatch the walls with the same. Well, I can use the same command, hatch, and click on the different areas. But notice what it's doing. It's converting back to that very dense pattern. That's because every time we hatch, it goes back to that single value. So what else can we do instead? I'm going to press escape, click on the existing hatch, and then click on the pick point button. And now everywhere that I select will match that existing hatch. And this allows me to zoom in and pick a hatch point, pick a hatch point. There we go. Pick a hatch point and pick a hatch point. Now sometimes it's appearing and sometimes it's not. And that may be a couple of different reasons. I'm going to pick all these points first and then press enter and see what happens. So my video card was not keeping up with what I was selecting. And that can be a bit disconcerting. So you got to trust yourself that you're doing the sequence correctly and then see it appear on your screen. All right, let's try that again. I'm going to click on the existing hatch. You can see all the different areas or the boundaries that have confined the hatch. Select pick point and click inside that area. You can see I clicked there. It's all highlighted, but it's not showing. Now if I press enter, it actually shows up. So don't worry about that. That's simply a function of the video card not being able to keep up with this. All right. Now, I mentioned earlier I have a door, and that door I'm going to insert now because of the hatch pattern is over top of that area. So how do we edit that hatch pattern? And I'm going to use an existing door, copy it, and move it so that it fits within that area, and then make any sort of modifications I need. So I'm going to select copy, and I'm going to pick this door, and I'll pick the edge of the jamb here, and then I'm going to move that door. And I'm just picking a nearer spot here. I can always relocate it later. So now I'm going to stretch the door jamb so it actually goes to the outer edge of it. Now, notice how the hatch pattern is interfering with this. When I select stretch and I go over top of this, the area I want to stretch, it's picked the hatch pattern. I've got a couple of options here. I can type in R and enter and remove that hatch from the stretch command. Then press enter, pick the point that I want to stretch, and move it to the opposite corner. Works perfectly fine. Now sometimes this is confusing and it becomes difficult, so I'm just pressing Control Z to undo it. The other option, turn off the hatch pattern. There we go. Turn off the current layer. That's okay, because I'm not going to be working with the current layer. I'm using a modify tool. This basically removes that temporarily, so I can do an edit, like stretch, cover the area that I want to stretch. It doesn't interfere with the hatch because that hatch is turned off right now. So I clicked on the two areas that I want to stretch, press enter. I'm going to select that corner of the door jamb and expand it to the edge of the wall. Beautiful. Press escape. Now I can turn the hatch pattern back on. There we go. And I didn't have to deal with the hatch pattern while I was stretching. So remember, the power of layers, being able to turn things on or off, gives us that ability to be able to modify things a bit more easily. Now I want to get rid of this hatch because I don't want it over top of the doorway. How do I do that? Let's select trim, and all I need to do is go over top of enclosed areas. There's one, here's another, and then the third one over here. Then press escape. And now I have effectively trimmed a hatch. So you can trim hatches. You can modify them after the fact. You can modify the nodes. So when I click on this, all these little squares and rectangles are nodes that I can push and pull and move in different locations. Now, to effectively plot this, right now, because I hatched last, these lines will overlap the edges of the walls. So how do I avoid that? I need to send them to the back. And I'm just scrolling through here so I can get a better picture of this. So I'm going to click on the hatch itself. Now, I'm going to right click right where my mouse is. And there's a thing here called draw order. And drawing order is very important when it comes to plotting. Hatching we like to do last after we have all the walls and all the details. So I don't have to trim and modify it the way I did by inserting that door. But I want to take this hatch pattern and basically send it to the back. So now the black line work, the edges of the walls, are in front of the hatch pattern, and it'll plot very, very nicely. And now I'm going to put in some hatch patterns for my floors. And you may have different types of patterns that you want to put in different locations. That's fine. So I've got this kitchen location. The thing about hatching is it has to be within an enclosed space. So if I don't have this line, I can't hatch this area. It's going to spill out into all these other areas. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I have my line work. So I press Control Z to bring that line back. And you can see the line has now, when it's come back, has overlapped the countertop. We can adjust that later. How do we do that? Click on it, right click on it, send to back, right? Draw order. send to back. And now what happens is this line work will come over top of it. It didn't appear to do that, but I'm just going to type in the word regen, R-E-G-E-N. You can see it typed down here, and that regenerates the drawing. So now it's in the right draw order. Okay, so let's put in a pattern for our kitchen floor. It could be a tile pattern. So I'm going to click on hatch. I want to select something that looks like a tile pattern in here. Oh, that looks like a tile pattern here. And I'm going to click inside this area. See, it's selecting the area already. And once again, it's solid white even though I picked a pattern. Why? Because the hatch value, the scale value, is too low. So once again here, I'll try starting at 1,000. I found that earlier. It seemed to work, and it seems to work. Can I scale that precisely? You could. To a specific size. It takes a lot of tinkering around with the numbers. You draw a tile to the right size and then you try to match the pattern to it. A lot of that sometimes is not necessary, but if you want to, you can. The interesting point about this is that it happened to go into exactly the right location where I wanted. But let's say it didn't. Now, what am I talking about? Notice how this pattern neatly edges right along that. In fact, it's slightly out. See how this is out a bit and that's out a bit? The hatch pattern, where it started, is someplace I don't like. So what can I do? I've clicked on the hatch pattern itself, and you'll notice that we have several options up here. There's one that says set origin. Let me click on that. What does that mean? If I click on a location, it will change where that pattern starts. And that's sometimes a nice detail to make things fit. You'll notice here I've got fractions of tiles along this edge. Well, I may want to change that. So I'm going to set the origin to this corner. And now the hatch pattern is neatly along that edge. So we do have some options here that we can play with in order to make the hatch pattern look more in line with our designs. Okay, I'm going to press escape. Remember to do this. Click on the hatch after you've applied it. Right click on it. Draw order. Send to back. Okay. So I've hatched successfully my floor in the kitchen. I've hatched successfully the walls. If you have any other areas that you want hatched, let's say the kitchen or the bathroom area, by all means. Now this is a bit tricky only in the sense of this. You'll notice that this floor pattern, or wherever the floor is going to be, has to end somewhere inside this doorway. But I don't have a line for that. A couple ways I can do this. Okay. And again, I'm trying to show you as many varieties of editing methods that can be used for something like this, and then you can pick whatever's the easiest one for you. I can temporarily draw a line or draw a line to make sure that that pattern goes to precisely that location. What else can I do? I could use the hatch pattern itself and modify it. So I'm going to do that. There is a problem with that, and I'll identify that as I work with it. But I'm going to hatch this, and I'm going to use a slightly different tile. So I'm going to go into this selection, and I may, for instance, want to do, let's say, a herringbone pattern, just for argument's sake. I'm going to click inside here. Look at how huge this is. 1,000. Which is the last setting. Doesn't seem to work, but I got a couple lines. That's okay. So I've clicked in there. Now I'm going to go up in here. I'll change it. I'll go a half at a time. So I'll go down to 500. Still way too large. I'll go down to 250. And you see it's still substantially large, so I'll go down to 10. That may be a bit too fine. So how much bigger do I want it than that? Let's go to 25. There we go. Now, with a hatch pattern, I'm just using this to demonstrate this. What I can do, if I click on the pattern itself, you'll notice I've got all these nodes. Okay, those are definitional points. Now, if I wanted to square this off, I could play around with those nodes by moving them into position. Or an easier way is to get rid of the ones you don't need. So I'm going to just move my mouse over top of this node and say remove vertex. Go to this one. Remove vertex. And see what it's done? It's produced a straight line for me. I can also do this. Let's say I don't like where it's ending and I want it partially in this doorway. Now sometimes we'll put in a transom there, and that may be a nicer solution. You'll notice that when I let go, look at that. the pattern doesn't have an edge anymore. So I may want to put in a marble transom or some sort of metal transom between different materials. Or I may want to draw a line to represent the edge of the doorway, or where that doorway line is going to be transitioning from one material to another. So I'm going to go into here, line, shift right mouse key, pick nearest. Remember, this is not an exact science here where I have that. And perpendicular. There we go. Press escape. Click on this, and you can see what's happened is that's not completed all the way to that edge. So how can I make that happen? I can go into any of these existing nodes and add another one. So I can select here, add a vertex. There we go. Now sometimes this is, you can see it's gone kind of weird on me. That's only because of where it's picked it. I need to understand, watch this, I'm going to click on this one and move it out here. I need to understand that this one needs to be here, this one needs to be here. So it has to do with the draw order of how it created this boundary edge. This one will be a bit simpler. Add a vertex and go here. And that one worked out just fine. So there's my floor pattern for the bathroom. Let me send it to the back. And now I've completed my pattern. There may be a requirement to have these floor patterns on different layers, but I still want to maintain this color. So what can I do? I'm going to select this floor pattern itself and this line work that's here and this one, and I'll transfer it onto a layer that I've already created. That's called floors. So I'm going to go into here. That color may be a bit overbearing. So in this menu here, see, this is our standard layers menu. This is our properties menu. I can override what I've set in my layers menu right here by changing that particular selection that I've done back onto color number 9, although it's in the floors layer. So I still have control within a layer to adjust parts of that layer, and that's what this property menu allows us to do. So at this point, I'm ready to insert my title block. I'm going to remove some of this information that's not necessary here, so it doesn't interfere with anything that we're doing. Now, whether you're asked to draw a brand new title block or you're going to be using a title block that's available to you, I'm going to be showing you a technique where I have a title block already in a layout tab. And it could be on a layout tab or it could be in the model space tab. It doesn't matter where it is. But this is the final page size, which is 17 by 22. So I'm going to take this item and copy and paste it into my drawing. So edit, copy with base point, and it's asking me to specify the base point. There it is. I'll pick the entire object by creating a window, pressing enter, and then I go back to the drawing and I will paste it. Now I'm going to make sure that I'm in a proper layer. If I don't have a title block layer, I can put it in layer 0 and edit, paste. Now what you have to remember is that this is going to be really small. I'm going to click here. And there's my title block. Now, why is it so small? First of all, it's in imperial. This is a metric drawing. So I have to first convert inches to millimeters, and then I have to scale it by the factor we're going to reduce it by. I hope that makes a bit more sense as we work through this. So this is a 17 by 22 inch page. I'm going to convert it to millimeters. So that's a difference of a factor of 25.4. So using scale, I'm going to put a window around it, press enter, click on any point. I'm going to select the same base point and type in 25.4. So now it is converted to a metric size page. Now, this is a metric size page at 1:1. This drawing that we're going to be doing is going to be scaled down to 1:50. So I have to increase this title block by a factor of 50. So scale, put a window around what I'm going to scale, press enter, pick a base point. There we go. And then type in 50. And there is my title block. Now, it seems large in my case, only because the drawing is relatively small. Your drawing is larger. So this should fit much better onto your page. Now I'm going to move previous, P and enter, so then that way I don't accidentally select the drawing, and I'll center it in place. So at this point you can add all the different text that you want. I can copy and paste text from here and edit it, or add new text. It's basically completing the drawing as best we can. So once you've added all the text information that's here in your drawing and it's all finished, we're ready to plot. So how do we plot this? All right, we'll go into File at the top of the page, Plot, and we come up with this menu. All right, so within this menu we have several options. Sorry, I'm trying to move this around. My screen is locking up. In here, I'm going to select for my page setup, none. I don't need to do anything here. For the plotter, I'm going to pick the Adobe PDF. Now, if this option isn't available to you, you can use the AutoCAD PDF. That's available on every program that AutoCAD creates. So let's select that one. And in here, the specs say that you're going to be using the expanded 22 by 17. There we go. Now here I'm not plotting the display, I'm plotting the space or a window. So I'm going to change this to display a window, and what it's allowing me to do is pick the window. So I'm going to click from this corner to this corner. Alright, so what did we actually do? Right now it says fit to paper, which simply means that it's going to take this and force it. Remember, this is a metric drawing that I'm putting onto a imperial page. So I'm going to first change this to read millimeters. So now it's converted the page to a millimeter size, and I don't want it to fit. I want a specific scale of 50, because that's what your assignment requirement is, 1 to 50. Okay, now when I do this, I want to make sure I center it. Now this is perfect because I've got red lines all around it. It simply means that the page is slightly bigger than the plot area. What it's referring to is this black outer line that I've drawn that represented the page. And none of the printers can plot to the exact edge of a piece of paper. But if I preview it, you'll come up with this annotation scale not equal to plot. That's fine. When I preview it, look, it will plot out exactly what I want, the way I want it. And notice how the line work is nice and crisp. That's because we kept sending the hatch work to the back. Okay, once I've previewed it and I'm happy with it, I'm going to click on this little X. And there's really nothing else to put here. I'm going to leave it at none. Now, if it's not going to be in color, it's going to be black and white. You can pick monochrome or grayscale, and that will print in a black and white color. Grayscale will add all the different shades, and therefore you get a bit more contour or shading difference between the hatching and the line work. Monochrome just does strictly black and white. But I'm not going to change that. I'm going to leave that at none, which will print in color. Window selected. I want it centered. Scales 1 to 50 in millimeters. Landscape, everything's fine. I just select OK. Now, this notation will come up again, because we're working with title blocks which are imperial. We're putting it onto an imperial page of 22 by 17, even though it's a metric drawing. So don't worry about this. Just simply select Continue. It'll come up with this menu. And in this menu, I have the interior design menu, and I will go into lesson 7 and plot however the format that was required by your instructor to make sure your name's in here. I'm leaving it as this just so that you can see what happens. And then it will plot this, and you'll come up with an Adobe Acrobat page. I'm just going to minimize all this extra stuff here, and it shows the drawing. Once you've plotted it as an Adobe Acrobat drawing, you can examine your work to make sure the line work is correct and everything else. And then from here you can plot to a plotter or save this on a USB stick and have it plotted wherever you typically plot your drawings. Okay, I'm going to close that, close this, close all the tabs here. Now before you finish this off, make sure you save your drawing. Place it where you want to place it. And this will be my finished drawing here. So you always have a copy available to you.